Sometimes the end is just the beginning. Time loops. So hello and welcome to Replay Value. Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite story mechanisms found predominantly in science fiction, and its fraternal twin fantasy. Time loops are fascinating, not only because of the surface level intrigue of what would we do if the same days or events played out over and over again, but in how it presents a ton of interesting narrative opportunities, from the obvious plot ramifications of such a situation, to how our characters respond and grow in what could be considered a blessing or a curse. For the purposes of this video, I'm looking at time loops in the vein of Groundhog Day, where we're repeating a set period of time over and over again, as opposed to a story like Primer, where the loop is the mechanism by which the time travel occurs. Primer, by the way, is dope, and if you like time travel stories, it's a must watch. What this video aims to explore is the different categories of time loops, how those changes impact the story structure and characters, and maybe recommend a few fantastic shows along the way. Perhaps the easiest way to understand time loops is that they serve functionally as puzzles. The question is usually either, how do we escape the time loop, or how do I right the wrong that has me choosing to loop indefinitely? Alternatively, if the time loop is set over a long enough period of time, it could be used to structure parallel universes, where the audience can watch one alteration ripple across the entire loop, which is less of a puzzle and more of a what-if scenario, though certainly if the idea is to find the best set of circumstances, that's a puzzle in and of itself. Puzzles are really engaging for an audience. It's what makes mystery and thriller two of my favorite genres personally, and a time loop which presents a very clear set of circumstances is a prime opportunity to create layered and complex puzzles that the audience will have plenty of time to chew on, since we'll be looping through it over and over again. This is especially effective since the desire for solutions is universal, see cognitive closure, and the human brain almost can't help but to speculate as to the conclusion. The time loop is either the puzzle or the box that contains it, and this duality of functionality is an elegant design that skilled writers can take advantage of. It's important to note that the structure of any given time loop has plenty of variance, things like loop triggers, duration, memory retention, so we'll mostly be looking at how those things affect the function and characters. So I want to state here that writers utilizing time loops need to keep in mind what the neutral state of their loop is. In practice, a time loop is simple, since the same scenes are repeating, but in execution, things need to be really polished to make sure that every element is holding to that neutral state until it's either directly or indirectly acted upon, and more importantly, to make sure that there's still plot progression in the loops, with a notable subcategory exception that we'll be getting to in a few minutes. To better understand time loops, we should categorize them, and we can do so by asking two simple questions. The first is whether or not memory is persistent for our main character through the loops. Persistent memory means that the character can remember what's happened on each and every time that they've looped. And it's pretty common. Edge of Tomorrow has persistent memory for the Tom Cruise character, just like Groundhog Day. Having the main character not remember is a bit rare, but can be used brilliantly in cases like Star Trek's Cause and Effect, where the crew needs to not only figure out that they're looping, but then also how to avoid looping again. In the case of the main character having persistent memory, we can further categorize by asking if the looping is performed causally. In other words, through the actions of a character, either intentionally or not. To use my previous example, Edge of Tomorrow would be a yes to this question. Every time Tom Cruise's character dies, he loops. Even if he doesn't want to die, the act of death is what sets off the loop, and in that way he has at least partial control, even if it's impossible for him not to die by the circumstances of his situation. Compare that with Groundhog Day. When the time hits 6 a.m., he loops, regardless of whether he's dead or has stayed up the whole night. It's entirely out of Bill Murray's character's control. In cases where the main character doesn't have persistent memory, we ask the same question but broader. If there is a character with persistent memory, do they have causal control? If there is no persistent memory, it falls into the later camp, so like that Star Trek episode 4 example. These distinctions create 4 categories from which we can understand the tropes of time loops, some subversions, and ultimately which ones are most effective for the type of story that is trying to be told. Our first category, yes to both persistent main and causal control, we'll be calling Jumper's Dilemma. These are stories that fundamentally take a sharp look at the character who continues to loop, either by choice or by circumstance, while they try and solve the puzzle that forces them to keep jumping back. Edge of Tomorrow would fall into this category, as well as ReZero, but the primary example we'll be exploring is Steins Gate. And it's weird to start with what I would consider the best time loop story on this list, but if you're gonna go big, you might as well go megalomaniac mad scientist big. Steins Gate begins with an unconventional time travel mechanic, where the Future Gadget Lab creates D-mail, messages sent to the past, which in turn affect the present. This goes from small things like almost winning a lottery to completely changing the culture of Akihabara. But it isn't until the Future Gadget Lab builds the Time Leap machine, the ability to send a person's consciousness back in time, that we go from a time travel story with constant forward progression in terms of time to a time loop story. Upon completing the Time Leap machine, agents from CERN, a malicious organization that desires to monopolize time travel for their own power, arrive and kill lab member Mayuri, Okabe's childhood friend. Okabe, our main character who has persistent memory, leaps back in time to try and save her, slowly discovering through multiple jumps that until he can change the world line that their universe is on, Mayuri's death is fated. An unavoidable occurrence even if CERN has nothing to do with it. Okabe is forced, in order to save Mayuri's life, to undo all of the changes that they made with D-mail in order to reach a world line where Mayuri's death is not destiny, even at the expense of their friend's happiness. Structurally, it's brilliant. All of the decisions made in the first half of the show to improve people's lives need to be undone in the second half, though they have no idea what they've gained and lost, so only Okabe and the audience are aware of the tragedy. This unification of viewpoint between main character and audience is critical, when we need to understand that Okabe is looping dozens of times beyond even what we see on screen, and highlight this emotional isolation that he's going through in his journey. I've chosen to call this category Jumper's Dilemma because the emotional turmoil and self-destruction that the looper chooses to endure could be prevented if they chose to stop looping, but circumstances are such that they will never choose to do so. There's also the question of whether one should strive to change their fate, when all that seems to create is as much sorrow as it does happiness. We not only watch Okabe struggle to solve the puzzle that is navigating to a better world line, but also dealing with the gravity of his decisions and those past pains of timelines gone by that he is forced to live with even as the people he tries to protect are blissfully ignorant to his struggles. Because there are multiple loops, there is a sense of progress as Okabe untangles the knot, and the circumstances, while similar between loops, do shift. Which is great because the show can go from the absurd to the ultra serious in the course of 2 loops without losing its footing. And it's important to note that not only do we really understand Okabe, but we also recognize the depth of the rest of the cast and their relationships through these repeated interactions, which allows all of them to be fleshed out considerably. All because Okabe's frame of reference, and by relation the audience's, is changing while those characters remains the same. What we know about Ferris at the beginning of the story and the end are completely different, but Ferris at the beginning and the end are effectively the same, just our perception of her has changed. Steins Gate is a masterpiece through and through, and I have simplified it in order to not make this an hour-long video only about Steins Gate, and gone as spoiler-free as possible in hopes that those who haven't seen it will do so. The double whammy that we discover at the end of Okabe's journey to save Mayuri is a heart-wrenching one, and with brilliant direction, writing, and music, it's a must-watch for any fan of not only science fiction, but anime as a medium. Perhaps the quintessential example of the Jumper's Dilemma, a time loop that is designed to break its hero down slowly but surely, even if the ending will just bring an even bigger smile. Our second category, yes to persistent main, no to causal control, is learn your lesson. These are stories that generally ask our characters to make a change in order to escape the loop. Usually it's the main in the case of a story like Groundhog Day, or sometimes it's a different character who also has persistent memory. A quick side note, this is also where you will find the really dark Sisyphusian loops, where there is no out and the character will loop eternally. There are some really good, spooky short stories out there if you're into this kind of thing, but I'd rather go really fluffy, so let's talk about our example for this category in the 2018 hit Bunny Girl Senpai. In a world where an affliction called adolescent syndrome brings quantum mechanics and theoretical physics to the everyday lives of our characters, from Schrodinger's cat to quantum teleportation, our main character Sakuta discovers that he's looping the same day, June 27th. Something of a problem given that he's confessed to his crush and would like to actually begin dating her. From there, we learn that Sakuta is not the only character who has persistent memory. An underclassman named Tomoe is also aware of the time loop. And she's also the one instigating it, resetting the day over and over again until she can get out of the situation that she has no desire to be in. There are 2 loops in Bunny Girl Senpai, and I think structurally that's important. The first loop on June 27th establishes both what Sakuta and Tomoe want, and also where Tomoe is as a character. It's the ever-present reminder of what needs to happen. Sakuta wants to be with Mai, and Tomoe needs to change. After we leave that initial loop with Tomoe and Sakuta fake dating, something Sakuta doesn't really want but that Tomoe can use to substitute for necessary character growth, we discover over the course of their time together that Tomoe is someone who wants to fit in and belong, due to her emotional hang-ups with the past. By the time that we reach the end of their time together, we begin a second loop, with Tomoe unable to let go of her feelings for Sakuta and realizing that he'll go be with his crush. Tomoe lying about looping through July 18th because of her inability to be honest with herself and others is the key character trait that she needs to acquire. Her overvaluing what others think for her and her place in class is what initially got the loop started, being asked out by that guy her friend was pining for. And in the end, not being able to be honest that she loves Sakuta. It isn't until she's able to come to terms with that, in her own words, grow up, that the loop ends, sending us all the way back to June 27th, where Sakuta and Mai can become a couple. And Tomoe is able to turn down the guy properly, even at the expense of her place in class. Sakuta serves as our lens into the loops, giving the audience a clear, unchanging desire to leave the time loop, even as we can relate to Tomoe's problems. He also serves as a nice bit of comedy, whether due to his misfortune of not looping when he's messed up, or using the loops to make some small visual gags. Learn Your Lesson is a good style of time loop for some laughs, some tears, and most of all, to liberate our characters in a literal sense, as they've learned to grow as people. Our third category, no to persistent main, no to causal control, is the infinite conundrum. This loop is done the least of the 4, and its use cases are pretty specific, but in my experience almost always serving as a way to explore the concept of déjà vu, or to serve as a seemingly impossible puzzle. The Star Trek episode I was talking about before falls into this category, and it certainly presents itself as the impossible puzzle variety. But longtime fans of anime probably knew from the start what we were going to be talking about here. It's none other than Haruhi Suzumiya's Endless 8. Endless 8 is fittingly named, since its 8 episodes are 8 looks into 15,532 loops of the same 2 weeks. For context, that's almost 6 centuries of time spent looping, and no one has persistent memory except for Yuki Nagato, who is unable to do anything to stop the loops. Haruhi, a character with godlike powers she doesn't know she has, is unsatisfied by their activities over summer vacation, which manifests as that period of time looping. Every episode follows the exact same format in terms of story beats, with changes in visual layouts, character outfits, and cinematography to highlight different elements and to distinguish between the loops. Functionally, Endless 8 does one thing unbelievably well. It makes the audience feel utterly helpless, as even though those visual changes are nice, they do nothing to take away from the tedium of watching the same story play out over and over again. In this way, it takes our relation with the story from Kyon to Nagato, even if the scale is infinitely smaller. Only 8 loops compared to over 10,000. Watching the 6th episode, for example, unknowing that there would be 2 more to follow, you'd feel an intense desire for Kyon to say something, literally anything, and a crushing sense of defeat when he doesn't do so. That sets up the movie Disappearance basically perfectly, and as that movie is a masterpiece in its own right, would make Endless 8 worth it alone. Thematically, Endless 8 is awesome, with tons of cool symbolism and direction to highlight the sense of dread as our characters approach the next loop point, but as a viewing experience, I think the once was enough for me. Our characters eventually escape the time loop by the power of déjà vu coming over Kyon so strongly that he bursts out almost fanatically screaming about the summer homework he has yet to do, enabling them to escape the loop. The extra day that was otherwise free now being used as an excuse to hang out. A puzzle box that seemingly cannot be solved due to the lack of persistent knowledge, the infinite conundrum is an excellent opportunity to explore the concept of déjà vu, the randomness of the universe even in a precisely regulated system, and to piss off your viewing audience. Our fourth category, no to persistent main, yes to causal control, is the final loop. This category barely counts as a time loop, but I'm counting it because not only does it nicely tie up with the system I've outlined, but you could be damn sure I'd be hearing about a certain magical girl anime in the comments for the next 10 years if I didn't. This type of loop is the foundation for the story to be told. A character who is not the main has been repeating time again and again to avoid or achieve something. And in this instance of the loop, something is going to change. It can either be for the good, not entirely dissimilar to Learn Your Lesson, or for the bad, Jumper's Dilemma, but you can be almost 100% sure that if your secondary cast member has been jumping through time endlessly and your story begins without the main character being aware, the loop is almost certainly coming to a close. And because I'd rather highlight an underwatched show than one of the most talked about in the last decade, we'll be taking a quick look at Revue Starlight. Set in Seisho Music Academy, the 99th graduating class is preparing their second performance of Starlight, a play that they have put on once before and will perform twice more before they graduate. The auditions for the play are multi-layered, with an audition by musical combat, no, seriously, it's great, to determine the best. Upon reaching the position of top star on the stage of fate, the mysterious giraffe will grant the winner any stage they wish to stand on. For Daiba Nana, there is only one stage that she could ever wish to stand on, and it has already happened, their first performance of Starlight back when they were first years. With the ability to return to that place where she was the most satisfied, most happy, most blinded by the performance, Daiba demolishes the top star Tendo Maya and successfully goes back to that first year all over again. Daiba believes that in repeating this performance, she can protect everyone from growing up, the pain of failure, from giving up. And so she does this over and over again dozens of times. And she's happy to be stagnant, to be trapped in this endless loop where only she remembers and she has to rebuild her friendships from scratch because it's safe. But we don't learn any of this until the 7th episode, long after the current iteration of the Stage of Fate has begun. And we notice that there's a huge difference between Banana's previous loops and the current one, specifically the existence of Hikari. She is, as it turns out, only the catalyst for the actual change, a Karen who is willing to try harder and harder to reach the top spot and keep her childhood promise with Hikari. And those two girls eliminate Banana from the auditions one after the other, ending the time loop. Banana's desire to maintain the status quo is at odds with Karen's belief of needing to improve each iteration. Banana's desire to feel safe and not feel failure goes against Karen's belief of getting up after you fall down. And so it is practically destined that Banana would lose and realize the importance of moving forward, that each stage is limited and that's what makes it special. And the desire to improve and to change is fundamental to being a stage girl. And as Juna makes abundantly clear at the very end of episode 9, those memories aren't something you leave behind, they're something you take with you until the very end. The final loop could be considered the second cousin to Jumper's Dilemma and Learn Your Lesson, in that it structurally is able to achieve either of those in how we're to engage with the looper. In this case, it's the latter, while in another certain show, it's the former. But since it's the time loop that mostly serves as the baseline for the story it's about to tell, that flexibility is its greatest strength, and enables a solid amount of foreshadowing for observant watchers and rewatchers, all the while not creating a repeating storyline. And that, fittingly enough, brings us to the end of this video. The time loop is simultaneously a simple enough story mechanic, but with plenty of variations that can leave the audience on their toes and a solid amount of polish needed to make a repeating timeline feel as though progress is being made while maintaining the loop itself. Whether a time loop is trying to make you empathize with a character by subjecting you to tedium or giving you knowledge that no one else holds, to try and teach a lesson or maybe just set the foundation, there are plenty of opportunities to explore characters within this storytelling mechanic. It is up to the writer to determine whether the time loop is a blessing a curse, both, or neither. Because sometimes the end is just the beginning. Time loops.